Well, the CPI report is out indicating potential economic storm clouds ahead. Let's take a look at some predictions. Hello, this is Chart GPT today. So the CPI report came out. It was 3.7 on the core for September 2023. Before we get into this, you look at predictions of economists. Maybe you could probably say the same thing about some of our predictions. But there's kind of a story out here. You can take a look at the description box and a post link to the references. A Goldman Sachs guy, I guess it's David Costa. I don't know him that well, but back in December last year, in 2021, that is, he was predicting the S&P going up, to new heights at 9%. The reality is it went the other direction. It just shows you kind of an anecdotal thing that shows you how economists, even at Goldman, chief equity strategists, how they can get everything wrong. Anyway, we had 3.7 on the, we'll look at the detailed chart on that a little bit later and some predictions of where it might be heading. So taking a look at, so what the Fed often looks at is this consumer less food and energy is at 4.3. So we're around, let's call it 4% on average, depending on where you're at. Here's kind of a chart on how it affects renters. You can see that the median household income rising slowly since almost 2 or 3 decades here, but the rent prices have gone up. So you can see that this obviously represents a huge loss in standard of living, and that's what people are complaining about. The cost of living is rising, yet the wages are not. Here's the obviously with the reduction of inflation, it also means median household income is stagnant, and so you can see that it's been pretty stagnant. 68,000 back in year 2000. Now it's 74, so it's not kept near at the pace of inflation. And looking at the Business Roundtable, they were saying basically that 32% of the CEO anticipate decreased employment headcount from 27% in June. So you can see that the whole idea of the economic outlook is getting weaker, even though that was just allowing the CPI to come down a little bit, but it's not coming back down to that 2% goal. But I want to focus here first on this housing, because a lot of people focus on the housing. And this is kind of like, take a look at the blue line. The blue line indicates, from the 91 to the 2006 before the crash, the increase in prices and how long it took. So over 100% increase from the start of the 91. And then you look at the rise from 2012 to 2022 through COVID. We've had much bigger. So you can see the inflation has been increasing at a rate. So we got even higher than the previous housing bubble, and in far less time. I guess that's 120 months. So we got to 174% from a baseline of 0 from the start date. And then the subsequent crashes, the 2008 crash, the housing prices, according to Case-Shiller, was down 50%. So if you use the timing and the actual potential loss, and the next say it's already down minus 16, if you believe this chart, and I believe the existing data, but the future indicates that housing prices could be down minus 75%. Based on the same data and if the same scenario plays out. Do I think that'll happen? Probably not. Of course, something we've been preaching about is the Fed pivot is nigh, and I think these interest rates are going to come off, which is then we're going to rekindle the inflation. So here's kind of the CPI. Here's the 3.7 number that we talked about. So the prediction is if they pivot towards the end of this year, in the beginning of 2004, we could see the inflation rise back up over 5 to 6, and then after the election, even higher. So this is kind of a prediction of where the CPI is going to go. Or you're going to get this picture that we showed in the Case-Shiller, or you're going to have this huge crash in the economy. So and that's what would create that minus 75 in housing index, if that should be. But I don't think they're going to allow the housing to go down that far. We'd have a complete total crash out in the economy. I think they're going to have to print the money, and inflation is going to come back. A lot of people say, well, you look at core versus this CPI, and here's a chart that just shows you that the CPI versus CPI less food and energy, one's just a faster moving. A lot of people make a big, they're not counting it correctly. But if you see the CPI goes much more wildly above and below the food and energy, it does track, and that's why the Fed tend to use the blue line, not because it's a little bit more stable. There's times when it's better and times when the CPI is better and sometimes it's worse. So this idea that, they're not really counting it, they are. It's just how you're going to look at it. course, this is our prediction here in terms of where we think the Fed funds rate is going. We're up around over the 5% mark. This decline will happen probably towards the end of the year, first of 2024, in time for the elections. To now that they got the CPI sorted down, but then they're going to have to kickstart this economy, or we're going to have a big recession/depression, and then of course that decline in rates is going to rekindle inflation, and then of course the Fed funds rates might have to go up after the election. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see if our prediction is correct. But there's our kind of the CPI, where it's heading over the next couple of years, as well as the Fed funds rate. So that's could be interesting. Take a look at the AI to understand more of the difference between core inflation and the non-core inflation. So that's interesting. And take our online poll. Do you think the Fed is going to pivot or not? And of course that means that the Fed fund rates comes down and CPI could kick up. Do you think the Fed is going to pivot, or are interest rates going to stay high and go higher from here and face a potential crash? Don't forget to subscribe.